All right. This week is we are going to go over the rules for Pesach. Of course, these are based solely on what the Bible says. They're not based on tradition. They're not based on the sages. They're not based on anything but that which God said. Uh, we're going to start it off with our preparations. That's our category. The first step in preparing for and celebrating Pesach is to celebrate the biblical New Year, or at least it could or should be. It's not an accident that the verse preceding the rules for Pesach is about the New Year. This Chodesh is your Hebrew word, this new moon, this month, as we say in English, shall be to you the beginning of Hadashim. It sounds an awful lot like the word for Kodesh and Kodashim. This is not the same word, but that's just new moons or months in plural. It shall be the first Chodesh, the first month of the year to you. That's from Shemot or Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. So this and no other day, no other month ought to be celebrated, this day in particular, ought to be celebrated as the Jewish New Year. We should not have two. I really disagree with that whole idea of having two New Years. It's dumb. We are followers by name, Yehudi, imitators, followers of God Himself. And God told us that this is a first month for us. It in the first day in the first month for us, it ought to be the beginning of our year, and maybe we ought to celebrate it as such. First day of the Chodesh of the month of Aviv is the actual biblical New Year. This is the same Chodesh, the same month that the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, were led out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. Aviv comes from the root Av, which means father. More specifically, in Hebrew, the father of something is its origin. Thus, Aviv is the father, the name for the month, Aviv, is the father or the origin of our year. Aviv marks the beginning of our journey from the darkness and bondage of disobedience. Did you hear what I said? From the darkness and the bondage of disobedience. It's from that to the freedom of Torah observance and right standing with God. Yes, our people went from being slaves to being slaves. But the kind of slavery that comes from man is darkness. And the kind of slavery that comes from God is right standing, it's righteousness, it's life itself. It is an abundance of life when we obey our God. So it's slavery, if you will, to the degree that we agree, that we choose to obey God's law because we choose life. We could and probably should, as I've said, have a New Year's party on the first night of this Chodesh. However, this is not a biblically mandated celebration, thus no day of rest is required. So if the party runs long into the night, you will still have to get up and go to work the next morning, unless, of course, you took the day off in advance. Calling in the next day is the wrong thing to do. Having this celebration would no doubt put any or all of us in the mood and mindset necessary to begin the actual preparations for the feast. The pretty exciting time of the year for, I think, most of us. I know it is for myself. So let's talk about the purchase of the lamb. Speaking to all the Adat Yisrael, all of the congregations of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this Chodesh, so Aviv, on the 10th day of Aviv, they shall take to them enough lamb to feed their family. Now, how do I know that? Because it's not what it says. I've translated the Hebrew words in a literal manner into English. It says, a lamb for a man, for a father's house, a lamb for a house. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Well, of course, unless you say that in Hebrew and you understand biblical Hebrew, then you realize it's saying you get enough to feed your family and whoever else you're eating with, you get enough. It's all about enough. Don't get too little and don't get too much. Figure it out, get the right amount. That's literally a Hebrew idiom in a law. On the 10th day of Aviv, you must procure a lamb or lambs, small or large enough to feed your family and all who intend to eat the Pesach meal with you. Now that's from chapter 12, verse 3. It is very important that we know exactly how many people will be attending our feast so that we will make the right purchase. So let your Rav, they call them rabbis in the English world, but Rav is the actual title. Let your rabbi know if you are attending the service well in advance. We need to know ahead of time. You may want to remind him if he is forgetful as you get closer to the celebration, because I base that on my life. If the members of an observant household are too few to eat an entire lamb, they shall share one. Cost included, I'm adding that to the verse, with their nearest neighbor. That's from verse 4. Verse 4 shows us that God does not want us to be wasteful. We should not purchase 10 lambs just in case extra people show up. We should know who will be there and purchase just enough, not be wasteful. This is not a command for God's children to live next to each other or next to other observant Jews, if you will. The easiest way to comply with this law is to celebrate Pesach with your Edah, with your congregation. The law is to procure a lamb. We do not have to make the purchase personally if our Edah, if our congregation is doing it. We must pay our part of the cost for the meal before the 10th of Aviv. If the Edah or some individual is picking it up for us, you got to pay in advance. They got to have the money to go do that. You can't expect your Edah, your congregation, or whoever you picked from your little group who's going to do it to pay it out of their pocket and you'll pay them later. That would be a sin. Pay them early so that they use the money that was set aside for that meal to pay for that meal. Anyway, here's some requirements for that lamb. It had to be male, a year old, a year old's good, without sickness, sores, or injuries of any kind. Of course, all of this is coming from verse 5. A lamb or kid taken from a herd of sheep and goats. Okay, when you go to the store and you purchase lamb, that's where it came from. It's a male. It has been taken from a flock and has been cut up and all that kind of stuff and made ready for the Pesach meal. So they're already doing that. That's why they call it kosher. That's part of the whole process. Some Jews, as well as lexical works such as Jusinius, teach that the lamb must be female. However, the Hebrew words min ha-kebasim, which means from the sheep or from the herd, ends with im, which is masculine plural. Even the root word keves is masculine. Just throwing that out there. I wanted to say a little something more, I think, about this. Let me see. Okay. When you go to purchase the lamb, you don't have to buy a whole lamb. Let's say we're an internet organization. Not everybody can actually attend here at the Adah, and so they have to do it on their property. Well, most of them don't have Jews around them that they can celebrate the Pesach with, so that now they're stuck buying an entire lamb and having to burn off all of that meat afterwards because that's part of the law, right? No, the meat that you go to these stores that sell this kosher lamb, other people are just buying the part of the lamb that they need to cover their needs so that they're not wasteful. This is well within the law of God. So it is okay for you just to purchase enough for your little family or for your little group. You don't have to actually purchase the whole lamb because somebody else is purchasing the rest of that lamb. You see how that works? Okay. I knew there was something else I wanted to say before I forgot, and I was about to forget. All right, it's too far. Okay, so let's talk about how the lamb is to be cared for. Every observant family who procured the lamb is responsible for the care of that lamb until the 14th day of Aviv. These days they call it Nisan. Here in our modern times, they don't say Aviv anymore. They say Nisan. I don't understand that. So anyway, I got that from verse 6. It is acceptable for someone from the Adah, from the congregation, to take care of the lamb on your behalf. Because if you're paying for it and you're doing it as a group, you're still the one responsible for it. So don't ask someone to be responsible for it that you're not so sure will be responsible. You know what I'm saying? Since Pesach often happens during the winter months, poor families of the ancient biblical times brought the animal into their home because if they were poor, they probably didn't own a barn. This, it kept the animals from freezing. This later became tradition with many more traditions tied to it. Thus, it is important to know the difference between tradition and mitzvah, which are commandments. Let's make some acknowledgments here about Pesach. The feast of God utterly belongs to Yahweh. The Pesach belongs to Yahweh. It says it in Exodus 12:14, in Vayikra, which is Leviticus 23:4. They are God's feasts. They do not belong to the Jews. They certainly don't belong to the non-Jews. They belong to God. And God said it with his own lips. Just saying. The feast is eternal. You shall observe the feast of Pesach, and I got /matzot, forever. You'll find that in Exodus 12:14, 12:17, 12:24, 12:25. Seems like God may have been trying to get something across here in 13:10. It's also found in Devarim, or Deuteronomy, chapter 16:3. That's a lot of God telling us that we're going to do this forever. So now, why would we celebrate on this day? Well, we always celebrate the Pesach on this particular day, because it is the anniversary of the day that God led the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. It says it in Deuteronomy 16:1. So now we know why this is done. The lamb must be sacrificed at the place where God's name, his authority, his Torah dwells. In other words, if there were a temple, there would be the Torah would be taught from the temple and the sacrifices would be made at the temple. So you would say that God's name, i.e. his authority, is it dwells there, right? Okay, we don't have a temple, but we do have the Adah. And what happens in the Adah? The word of God is taught. Thus, that's where the sacrifices really should take place. But you remember, not everybody can make that trip. So in those cases, well, you should be teaching the Torah at your home or learning it in your home or something so that God's name will dwell there. Anyway, this rule comes from Deuteronomy 16:2, 16:6, 16:7. So it's very important that you don't take your family and go someplace outside of your home where God's law is not taught. I'm just saying. Okay, we are not allowed to sacrifice the Pesach lamb in our homes or any property we own, because it says inside our gates in Deuteronomy 16:5. There is the exception that I've just mentioned. If there is nowhere for you to go, there was a couple of guys that came to Moshe, came to the tabernacle when they were in the wilderness. And they said, Moshe, we just came into contact with a dead body. What should we do about Pesach? So Moshe said, well, I'm going to have to go pray about that. I don't know. So he goes and he talks to God. And he comes back to him and says, you have to celebrate the Pesach. It was a command. So this really should tell, because these people were unclean and impure. You're coming into Pesach not having done something like that. And what do? Well, we should be able to see from that story alone that if our home is the place where the Torah is taught, then our home is the place where God's authority dwells, where God's name resides. And if we cannot, now I'm saying if you can't, if you can be here, you should be here. If you can't, I mean, you gotta, at some point, you gotta say, okay, that's just a little too far to ask somebody to drive or fly or whatever. I mean, if you have the money and you have the time or whatever and can drive or fly, then you really should be here. But if that's not possible, then you have to do it in your home. But you really, really need to only be doing that if the Torah is studied and learned and taught in your home. So you really need to make that a part of your life if that's something you're stuck with. For instance, our home is on the property that our synagogue sits on. And so it's like, oh, do you have a problem? Well, no, I don't have a problem because this is where the Torah is taught. So we make the sacrifice here. We celebrate the Passover here. And I believe we're well within the law to do that. All right. Hopefully that clears it up. I don't want it to sound like I'm making some excuse. I'm hoping that I've made that clear enough for you to understand that it is okay according to God's law. All right. This is talking about the firstborn males. All firstborn males, human and animal, are to be sanctified on the first day of Pesach. That's from Exodus 13:2 and 13:12. This is also a command for every firstborn to make an appearance before his Edah, his congregation. If he does not live in Israel. If he lives there, he's supposed to go to the temple. We don't have a temple in Israel. What do? You go to your Adah. Because why? That's where the name of God is. This law includes all who live in Israel until the Heichal is restored. In other words, going to the Adah. So how do we do that being an internet service? Well, we need to see you on our little video thing. So if you don't know how, or you can't turn your camera on so that we can see you live, get a picture of you on that day and give us a picture of you to see. If you don't know how to do that, call BR549. They're very helpful. No, just kidding. Call me or somebody that's that can help you to get your image on what's that thing we use in Google Meets.
Couldn't they text you or?
There's an idea, Donna. You could text an image of yourself to my phone. That would work. You're just supposed to appear before the representative of God, basically the one that's making the sacrifice or overseeing it anyway. Every firstborn donkey, it goes on to say, will be redeemed with a lamb, which means that a donation of a spotless, the cost of a spotless 1-year-old lamb must be donated to your synagogue. So that's if you have a donkey. just for those of you who had just recently had a donkey born unto you, and it's the firstborn of your donkeys. Just saying, probably not going to be a lot of you there. But whatever, you're going to have to look it up. Whatever a 1-year-old lamb would cost you to purchase, that's how much you're supposed to give to the synagogue. Again, you can't give it to the Heichal, to the temple, because it's not there. If a person does not want to redeem their donkey, he must, how does it, break the neck, it says. Oh, why? You just got to kill it? Oh, come on, people. This is idiomatic. If a person does not want to redeem the donkey, doesn't want to pay the price of that sheep, he must then make that donkey a pet. That never works. That's how you break the neck of a donkey. Because what did they do back in the day? They put a yoke around its neck, and it pulled the plow or pulled the cart or something like that. You weren't allowed to do that. It had to be a pet. Teach it to sit and stay and roll over and stuff, whatever, But don't use it for work. That's all that break the neck of the donkey means. It doesn't mean you literally break a donkey's neck. That's in 13:3. And it's only of the first one born to that particular donkeyette. I don't know what the mama donkey would be called. Again, this means that a donation of a spotless 1-year-old lamb or equivalent of the price must be offered to the Adah, or if the Heichal stands, you give it to them, provided you live in Israel. Oh, I was going to say, I must have missed something. Yeah, I missed a whole sentence here. But the firstborn males of humans must be redeemed. 13:3 in Exodus, or Shemot, however you want to look at that. So that's the price of a sheep being given to the synagogue to redeem your firstborn son. Okay, let's talk a little more about the rules here. The Pesach must be eaten in one place. It cannot be taken from place to place. So if you've made the food and you're fixing it, let's say you're one of those homebodies and you're fixing it at your home, you can't like scoop some up and take it to your family member's place of work so that they can eat the meal. They should be there with you. If they're not there with you, they cannot eat the Passover meal. I hope that doesn't sound harsh, but it has to be eaten in that one place. You can't pack it up and take it somewhere else. It doesn't mean that you can't cook it outside and take it in your house and eat it. That it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you can't pack it up and take it elsewhere so that somebody else can eat. That's what's being spoken of here in 1346 of Shemot. We cannot break the bones of the lamb. Don't do it. It's 1246. All of the Adat Yisrael, that's all of the congregations of Israel, must celebrate the Pesach. Shemot, which is Exodus 1247. Nobody gets out of it. Oh, well, we're this kind of Jew. Oh, we're that kind of Jew. Nope. All of the congregations must celebrate. Those who cannot eat the Pesach, let's see. No one who is uncircumcised and or non-observant, they say foreigner in English, may eat the Pesach. That's in 1243. We just spoke about this word for foreigner just this past week. And we were talking about how the foreigner was the non-priest because the food was for the priest and the foreigner couldn't eat. So the foreigner in that case became the priest. So literally in this verse, because it's talking to the Bnei Yisrael, if you're not Torah observant, which is what makes you a Jew. I mean, you can be born of Italian descendancy or any other. It makes no difference. That's not what, you're not born into Judaism through a bloodline. You're born into Judaism via your observance of God's law. That's what makes Yehudi a thing. I mean, think about it. The father of the Jews wasn't a Jew. Avraham from the middle of, or the southern part at least, of Mesopotamia. That's not the land of the Jews. Pretty close to it, though. Anywho, so you get that. The foreigner in this case is someone who'd be uncircumcised in particular, but somebody who is not observant. Neither, it goes on to say, a hired nor an indentured servant is allowed to eat the Pesach unless they have been circumcised. So think about that. Your hired servant in this case is not, you didn't just hire someone to come by and mow your lawn for the celebration and invite them to see a hired. No. If you have a hired servant, you have hired them to do a long-term job. They're not talking about anything, short-term here. And that's within the understanding of the Hebrew word. But then when it talks about, and I think it says slave in English, which it just totally butchers what the Bible's talking about. When those things get translated as slave, mostly it's talking about an indentured servant. It's like Yaakov, who worked for a certain number of years so that he could get a certain number of sheep and whatnot and a wife. That's what they're talking about, that indentured servitude. And those two type of servants, if you will, can eat the Pesach dinner if they are circumcised. If they're not, they cannot. Then it goes on, no circumcised male shall eat the Pesach, period. So you can make the exceptions for the people that are literally kind of part of your life. They're in your life there, because if they're indentured or long-term, they're actually living on your property. But now it's stepping outside of that realm and saying no one No man who is uncircumcised is allowed to eat the Pesach. So do not use the Pesach meal to introduce your Christian friends to Judaism. Okay, it's not a ministry, because at that point the guys are going to what? Have to come in your house and drop the drawers so that you can know. No, don't do that. Okay. And so, speaking of the outsiders who can eat, if an uncircumcised and or non-observant foreigner lives among you and wants to eat the Pesach, he, his sons, and the servants of his household must all be circumcised. Shemot or Exodus 12, number 488. Verse 48. I hit that 8 a little happily there. This is an idiomatic way of saying if a person wants to convert to Judaism, he may be circumcised before he eats the Pesach. He's more than welcome to do that, but circumcision is part of this deal. So can Christians eat the Pesach and not be circumcised? No. And the New Testament does not say that they can, though that's what many of them teach. Okay, the same way. We cannot make second-class citizens out of anybody. Everyone, convert or Jew, shall celebrate Pesach the same way. And that comes from Bamidbar, which is Numbers 9:14, in where we just come from, Exodus. So it's in there more than once. Okay, so let's talk about the fact that there are two. There's a first Pesach and a second Pesach, both of which are connected to Matzot, followed directly by Matzot the next day. On the 14th day of Aviv is the first Pesach, and you can okay, well, we've seen that in Exodus. I've also added that it shows up in Leviticus 23:5 and 23:6. And when this Pesach happens, we are to call the first Mikra Kodesh, the first Holy Assembly. We do that on the 14th day, which is the first day of the feast. That comes from Exodus 12:16 and from Leviticus 23:7. So how do we do that? Well, remember, every year when we start this thing, first thing we do is what? We blow a horn. Welcome it, Hag Sameach Pesach, happy celebration of Passover. I'm kind of calling it right now because here in a couple of weeks we'll enter into Pesach, giving you plenty of time to prepare and all that. But the actual calling of it it starts with the blowing of the horn. It also says that no occupational work can be done during the Mikra Kodesh, beyond that which is necessary to prepare food. You can find that in Exodus 12:6, Leviticus 23:7, and probably some other places. You are allowed to prepare your food. That means that you can wash dishes, you can wash your food, to whatever it takes to prepare your food. You can set your tables, you can clean up after you've set your tables. It doesn't just cover the preparation, it covers the whole celebration, the whole thing. So yes, the cleanup can be done. There will be those who would argue against it. If it don't feel right about it, then leave all the dishes on the table and do it the next day. That's okay with me, but to me the text is telling us that whatever is necessary to, for the whole of that meal that night is perfectly fine. Here's a neat one. You will stay out of your home all night and return in the morning. Yes. Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 7 actually says that. This does not mean that you have to stay awake all night. It does not mean that you can't stay in someone else's house. It doesn't mean you can't stay in a motel. It doesn't mean you have to stay in a tent, though you can if you like. It just means you can't be in your house. That's the tradition of Jews staying in other Jews' homes. That's where that came from. I don't think that's as popular as it used to be, but there was a time when that was a big thing. Okay, now you on the 10th, or I mean before the 10th, you had to give your part of whatever it costs. You should not just be paying for the lamb. If there's going to be potatoes and pizza, why you do that, I don't know. Coleslaw, stuff to drink, whatever. You're supposed to pay for the whole meal. And whatever that meal would cost you in a restaurant is a good idea of what you ought to be paying. But aside from that, you will not come to Pesach without an offering. That's from Deuteronomy 16:16. This is money separate from the payment for your meal, and it is separate from your tithe, separate from your normal offerings. Don't take it. Don't say, take money out of what's going to your congregation anyway and use it here. God will know. Just saying, he'll know. I don't know what he'll do about it, but he'll know. All right, then this is the best part. You shall have a barbecue each day of the feast. Wow. So Pesach, all of matzot, you're going to have to cook something out on the grill one time a day, each day during this feast season. It does not have to be lamb. Lamb is only for the first night. If you want to eat lamb every night and you got that kind of money, well, knock yourself out. But and that's, I guess, probably why God was specific, because normally people would have bought a big old lamb and eaten it all week, And God's like, nope, you got to burn the leftover. We haven't gotten to that yet, but you do have to burn the leftover. All right. Now, it says, take all the leaven from your houses on the 14th day at evening until the 21st day at evening. So you're not allowed to take it out before the 14th. There is an exception. It should be the 14th, right? Well, what's the exception? Well, think about it. A lot of people could not make the trip from where they live all the way to the temple and be home on the 14th, since they're at the temple on the 14th. You follow what I'm saying? So they had to take the leaven, and what a lot of them did in the ancient time was just pack up the leaven in some kind of container, and then on the 14th they would rid themselves of that. Now, if you're getting on an airplane, probably not going to bring your leaven with you, right? So get rid of it early. That's going to be your exception. And only that. If you're going to be home on the 14th, then you need to clear out on the 14th, not ahead of time. And then it's not allowed to be in your house throughout the whole of that celebration. Of course, you can find that in Exodus 12:15, 12:19, 13:7. Do not eat anything leavened during the Pesach/Matzot feast. That's Exodus 12. It's Deuteronomy 16. You are not to be seen with leavened anything. I wrote bread. I shouldn't have done that. You're not to be seen with leaven. You can't have the bread in your hands. You can't have, a box of leaven, or I don't know what leaven is. Can't have a Coke. It has leaven in it. Don't be caught with that stuff in your hands, people, because you're not allowed to do it. Can't be seen with it. Does that mean you sneak around with it? Well, God knows. No leaven will be found in all the places you dwell, and is under your authority for 7 days. So You can't take the leaven and put it in your garage. You can't take the leaven and lock it in some building behind your house. You can't put it at, if you own a little company and you've got this little building downtown, you can't keep it there because that's within your gates. It's under your authority. So what we personally do is gather up our leaven. We throw a few extra things in there just to be nice, and we give it to our neighbors. They are non-Jews, but they really love it. We throw in some cookies and stuff like that. Like I said, just to be nice. Because we don't generally have cookies in the house. I mean, maybe once or twice we did, but that's not normal for us. But it can't be in any place that's under your control. For some of you who have family members who are not Jewish and don't follow after Judaism and stuff like that, I suppose you could take it to their house. I just think it's nicer just to give it away than to hand it to somebody else and then have them give it back to you later, because there is no law that says that you can't own it. And so you don't have to sell it to somebody that's non-Jewish for $1 and buy it back for $1. That's the key thing that some Jews do. Very unnecessary, but a tradition, I suppose. Unleavened bread is called the bread of affliction because it is the bread that reminds us of the afflictions of Egypt. I'm basing that on the fact that the Hebrew text in Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 3 says exactly that. So we're actually being given reasons here. And when God laid out most of the law, you don't even get the reason for it. And God's actually giving us the reasons. And so anything we do to give a reason outside of what God said, I'm a little sketchy about. Yeah, we have such a good recipe of matzah. We'll just eat that stuff up, won't we? We don't really care. Everyone who eats leaven during the feast, whether born in Yisrael or not, must cut themselves off from Yisrael until the feast is over. Well, that's okay. I don't live in Yisrael. Remember, what makes them say it this way, what makes people say it this way, is because there is a bait attached to the front of the word, right? And so that bait is normally translated in, but it's also translated with Yisrael. That's why the sages, one of the few things I feel like they ever got right was that these rules are for every Jew. If you're Jewish and you're living according to God's law, you are Bet Yisrael. You are with Israel. It's not about being there. It's about being part of it, no matter where you are. That's a good way to say it. Exodus 12:15, 12:19. Okay, they cannot attend the closing celebration. Who's the they? I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, those people who eat the leaven. So if you find out that you've eaten the leaven, you can't come to the closing celebration. Because some people do that by accident. I did that one year, years and years ago. I had gone to the VA to see the doctor. Couldn't eat till I got there, and so I had nothing to eat all day. It was 3:30 or 4, whatever it was. It was getting late in the day, and I was starving, and forgot that it was right in the middle of Pesach. And I stopped in and grabbed a hamburger. I took one bite before it. What did I just do? And I spit it out. I was not going to just go ahead and eat it. Oh, I've already committed the sin. I'm just going to go ahead and eat it. No, that's not what you do. Spit it out, throw it away like I did, and get some French fries. Anyway, I don't even know if they had put lemon in French fries or not. But be careful about that, whatever it is, So if you've slipped up and you've had some leaven, or didn't, or maybe it's because you didn't know that leaven was in it, well, you can't come to the closing ceremony. They cannot attend the Shabbat service that happens during the ceremony. Now, if the ceremony is over on Thursday, you can go to Shabbat the following Saturday. This is the service that's connected with the actual celebration. They cannot communicate with those who are Torah observant, those who are still faithful. You can talk to anybody that you want to that's a non-Jew, but you cannot communicate with the Jews. So what do you do when you bump into them and they're getting all trying to get you, to have a conversation with them? You just simply say unclean. I heard a preacher trying to teach on Jewish stuff one time, and he said that when the people had leprosy, they'd walk, around, and the Jews would point at him and say, unclean, unclean. And it was like, oh, yay, yay. No, if they had to travel through a place where there was a bunch of people there, they didn't want the people to touch them because of their impurity, and so they would say unclean. That way people didn't try to talk to them, people didn't try to touch them and give them hugs and stuff like that. That was to help those of us who have not come in contact with this stuff. So you just say unclean. Can you be a part of the celebration over the interweb? Well, yes and no. Yes, you can listen in and watch. No, you cannot get on the text thing and all that kind of stuff. So if there's 12 people on the text message trying to get you to talk, just type unclean. Don't explain it. That's somebody wants to explain it. Just type the word unclean. We're all Jews. We know what that means. All right, also, if a man is clean during the first Pesach and does not celebrate it, he is to cut himself off from Yisrael all the way up until the second Pesach, because he has to celebrate, one of the rules is he has to celebrate the Pesach, the second one. But he's cut off from the time that the first one started till the time the second one starts. If you happen to eat something unleavened during the Pesach, you're only cut off during that Pesach. So that's the difference. And you find that in Bamidbar, or Numbers 9:13. Then we're commanded also to eat matzot. You hear that's plural? That's not singular. Each night from the 14th until the 21st day of Aviv. Oh, well, that's why it's plural, because it's more than one night. No, that's not plural in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew is written in plural because this goes on forever. Anyway, but we do this, it says, as a reminder that God led his followers out of Egypt quickly. Quickly. You can find that in Exodus 12:15, 12:18, 12:20, 13:6, Vayikra or Leviticus 23:6. You can find it in Devarim or Deuteronomy 16:3, 16:8. Pretty important. When something gets repeated that many times, you have to know how important this is. So each and every night, we eat this bread as a reminder that God led his children out of that bondage quickly. The lamb for each observant family will be killed as the sun is going down on the 14th day of Aviv. Now, obviously, we can't do that. In Canada, it's completely illegal. You're not allowed to kill a sheep in the kosher way in the land of Canada as of a week or so ago. It's the beginning of the Jewish pogroms has begun. And that's what always happens leading into World War, is that starts. And we've already started. Jewish pogroms are coming down all over the world. So pray for your country. It's very important. Anyway, we don't kill the lamb on the 14th, and we have to go and we have to purchase it from the people who actually do slaughter the animal and prep what we call the kosher lamb now. And we generally purchase it on the 10th because we're buying the pre-cut food. That's sheer necessity. Now, if you want to be all gung-ho and all total about it, first thing you have to do is make sure you have enough people to eat that much sheep, because you can't be wasteful. Second thing you have to do is learn how to slaughter that sheep. Then you have to learn how to cook that sheep in the dark, by the way. You start at first sundown. And because I hope you guys know this, but when the sun goes over the horizon and you still have light out, that's the first sundown. The second sundown is once everything gets dark because the sun has passed far enough away. So there's two sundowns, just like there's two sunrises. When the light comes up, but the sun hasn't come over the horizon, that's the first sunrise. And then when it comes up to where you can actually see the beginnings of it, that's the second sunrise. And we have the same thing on the first Sabbath and the second Sabbath. Sometimes they're talking about the same Sabbath. Okay. So the cooking of the food begins at the first sundown. You still have some light to get it started, but it will not probably be finished before the sun is completely gone. But anyway, if you want to go all gung-ho, and you can do that legally, I would say go for it. Most of us can't do that. It's illegal where we live. So, you can't slaughter animals and stuff like that. And, health people get involved in that sort of thing. Okay, but anyway, this is done on the anniversary of the night that God led his children out of Egypt. And of course, that what I just said came from Deuteronomy 16:3 and 6. The Hebrew words ba'arev kevo hashemesh mean in the evening as the sun goes down, not after the sun goes down. So we're talking about what we Jews have come to call the first sundown. Okay, let's talk about the blood on the doorpost. On the very first Passover, we had to place blood over the doorpost. I guess that's called the lintel, and on the doorpost. That's from Exodus 12:7. And then we had to place the blood of a lamb in a basin from 22. We had to dip a basting brush in the blood in the basin and paint the blood on the lintel and both sides of the post. That's from 12:22. Once the blood was applied to the door, the post, and the lintel, no one was allowed to leave their home until after the sun came up the next morning. Still in verse 22. The blood was placed on the door only on the night of the first Pesakh. This was a one-time thing. It was there to physically keep the destroyer from killing the firstborn Jews that were behind those doors. It was a one-time thing, but we can place, what we do here is Donna sewed together these red, silky looking scarves, so we put them over the top and the sides of the door as a reminder of that. But Deuteronomy, we stay out of the house. So what is that about? Well, the first time we had to cower inside our homes to stay alive. From that point on, given that we gave our lives to God and said, yes, whatever you said, God, we will do and obey. From that point on, We stay out of our house, and that's to remind us that God has saved his firstborn. Okay, well, let's talk about the meal. Golly. I may have to go a little over, maybe not. It's hard to tell where I am at this point. It says that we have to roast the lamb in fire. It has to be cooked over an open flame. It cannot be cooked in your oven. Because even though your oven may have a flame underneath a pan, and how would that differ from you cooking your meat on a pan on top of a outdoor cooker? Because it's enclosed inside the thing. So your outdoor cooker, would that be that? That's kind of, well, those two are very similar. So I think the point is your meat's supposed to be on the actual grill thing. I think we're going to have to make that conclusion here. But you can look at Exodus 12:9 and Deuteronomy 16:7 if you want to look at it. It says, don't eat it raw. We can't leave it bloody like they do in the restaurants so much. And that's in 12:9. Do not eat it boiled in water. Don't do that. That's also 12:9. And it says, cook the head, legs, and body together, also in 12:9. That is a Hebrew idiom. Please don't do that if you're one of those gung-ho people who can actually, slaughter a lamb and do this. Don't do that. Anytime the biblical text gathers up the whole of anything, you have to look at that idiomatically. What it means is all that is left over after the slaughtering of this animal, all of that meat is supposed to be cooked at the same time. They don't mean cook the head. They don't mean cook the legs. And although cooking the body makes sense, but you're not supposed to do that. It's not, that's so gross. It's just saying that whatever, after the slaughter is done and you've cut all of the meat pieces out, you cook all of the meat at the same time. Exodus 12:9. Then it says, eat the lamb at night. So you don't start cooking that lamb until the sun has gone over the horizon, but there's still light. That's where you start, because it's as the sun is going down, the first sunlight. And so it's probably not going to be finished, although it could, before the sun goes completely down, which is perfectly fine, because as long as you wait till the sun goes over the horizon, you're eating or cooking and maybe even eating as the sun is going down. So it's okay. But generally, it's not ready until after it's dark. So eat the lamb at night. Exodus 12:8. Eat the matzot that same night. Eat bitter herbs, and that is in plural. Does that mean you have to eat a bunch of different ones? I thought that for years. No, that means you have to do this forever. All right, with a belt on your hips, and back then that would have been a rope, so that's what we do when we have a celebration. We have these special little ropes we tie up to have as a belt. Shoes on your feet, can't be barefoot. A staff in your hand, and if you're here, we have the staffs that you can, that an artist made for us that are really nice that you can sit there and hold while you eat. And you have to eat in a hurry, which kind of goes against the whole Passover meal, doesn't it? Then burn the leftover lamb in fire so that no part of the lamb's flesh will remain until the morning. You cannot burn the bones. If there's flesh on the bones, throw it in there, because the idea is to cook the flesh off the bones. But that's Exodus 12:10, Deuteronomy 16:4. The second Holy Assembly happens exactly 1 month later on the 14th of the following month. Oh, I meant to click that off before it got there. And everything about it is identical to everything that we've said about the first one. So I don't really feel like I need to go through that. If a person is not clean during Pesach, according to the laws of purity, he can celebrate Pesach on the 14th of the second biblical holiday. It must be celebrated in exactly the same way. So, Bamidbar or Numbers 9, chapter 9, verse 12. I want to go through one last thing before I end today. To prep for the actual ceremony, the Bible tells us to teach your children to ask the following question. It's ha'avodah hazot lachem. They don't have to say it that way, but if they want to, that's great. But what did I just say? What is this service to you? Which is literally what it says. That's not really what it means. Of course, that question is based on Exodus 12:26 and 13:14. It's in both places. It's also in Leviticus, though it doesn't say as many things. And then there's a whole list of answers that you're supposed to give. For those of you who have the rules of Pesach, you have those answers. I have updated it. It's not quite finished, but I have updated it. So someone remind me maybe during Passover, and I'll try to get everybody an updated copy of it, because I want it to be more of something that will teach you and that you can teach from. If you ever find that you need to do that, like you're at home and you can't go to your Adah, you'll have to lead this. And so I want you to have this so that you can, in fact, do so. Plus, it'll give you the ability to read off the transliterated words so that you're actually saying the Hebrew word, sort of thing. So just remind me of that, and I'll give everybody a copy that I can. If you're out there in the internet world, just send your request for a copy in touch at allon, ALLON, one word, .org. And I'll be happy to send it to you. It is my work. I own the copyright on it. You can do anything with it you want to. You can pass it on. You can use it, whatever. As long as you're not making money on it. Don't take my stuff and make a book and make bazillions of dollars and think I'm going to be okay with that, because I'm not. But if you're doing this for your home or your congregation or something, you're more than welcome to it. Shalom, shalom.
The blessing, Be'rit. Yevarecha Yahweh beyish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha vihunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness and favor and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.